So I have a new tour we just announced called The Art of Joy. We got some incredible new music that we're putting out, and the rule that I have with my wife about it is that we try not to go more than 2 weeks without connecting with her, with the family, with everything. So we just once we set the tour, then we try to figure out, all right, where's the days off? How do we make this work so that it's not more than 2 weeks? Something about past 2 weeks starts to feel like the lack of connection is a little bit scary. So especially with kids, I haven't brought them out. My littlest one was born like the second week of the pandemic. So she doesn't even know. We were walking in my house the other day and she pointed to a photo of the older girl like on stage that we took in front of a crowd. And she's like, what happened? Like, what is that? And I'm like, oh my God, you don't know. You don't know anything about how this goes. You don't know, like you haven't been around massive groups of people. You haven't, it's pandemic babies. So I'm excited to eventually get her acclimated to this lifestyle.
What's doing, everybody? I'm Alec Lace. Thank you for watching First Class Fatherhood. Today's guest on the podcast is Andy Grammer. Andy Grammer is a triple platinum recording artist. He's got a brand new single out now titled Damn It Feels Good to Be Me. We're going to talk about that and so much more. So get down there, smack the subscribe button, tap that like, and let's jump into it right now with Andy Grammer on First Class Fatherhood. Joining me now, First Class Father, Andy Grammer. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Oh, I love it. This is my favorite, man. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Let's kick it off like this here. How many kids do you have? How old are they?
I have two baby girls. One of them is 4 and the other one's 1.5. So we're in it at the moment.
Wow, very cool. You guys going for the boy or are you all done?
We'll see. My wife has this disease called hyperemesis, which makes pregnancy really difficult. She just like throws up the whole time. She had to have an insert with drugs for all 9 months. So the babies are so great that the fact we're even considering it means shows so much of how much we love being parents. But we'll see. It's a roll of the dice at the moment whether we get another one.
Yeah, very cool. Like I was saying to you before, I got 4 myself. We had our 3 boys and then got the girl on the 4th try. If not, we'd have 5 by now. But
you just keep going. Exactly.
Yeah, she we're glad we got her. She runs the show over here. So
that's amazing, man. That's incredible.
If you could, Andy, please just take 1 minute to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure. I am a musician, songwriter, touring musician. Been doing it for a really long time. Write a lot of songs and love to be out on tour, which I haven't been able to do for the last 2 years, which has been kind of a sweet gift in this way with the 2 girls, to be home, have a routine every single day, bedtime, bath time, in the morning when we wake up. It's been unbelievable.
Yeah, very cool. So take me back to the beginning then, if you could, here to your fatherhood journey. About how old were you when you became a dad, and how did becoming a father kind of change your perspective on life?
Yeah, so man, 4 years ago, I'm 37. Yeah, so I was like early 30s, and it was so incredible and sweet and amazing, and finding the balance between running around the world and playing shows and making enough time to get home. I hadn't had something yet, which I don't know if I should be embarrassed to say this, that just was like just more important. Like I'm a very driven person. And so if Jimmy Fallon calls and I can be on his show on this day, then I'm going to go do it. And Fallon did call, and it was going to be within like a 7-day window of when my daughter was supposed to be born. And there was this interesting thing where it was like, oh, then I can't. And that was one of the first moments in my life where I'm like, oh, this is just more important, which is really cool to have stuff like that and really start connecting to what's just the most important. I think that's what kids do for you.
Yeah, very well said, Andy. And what would you say you enjoy most about being a girl dad?
There's so many sweet things about it, but I'll give you like the deep one is I really enjoy the responsibility of being like the ambassador to the other whole other gender of the world, like really getting to go like, oh, you're going to base a lot of what you think about men based on my interactions with you and how you're treated and what I show you. So that's a really fun responsibility to have to try to execute on daily,
Yeah, it's an important one too, Andy. I talk on my show all the time about the fatherless crisis we have going on with so many kids growing up without a father or a father figure in their life. and it's having a devastating toll on our society. And one of those points is that girls that grow up with no father in the home, just looking at the statistics wise, girls are more likely to become pregnant as teenagers that grow up with no dad in the house. They get involved, teenage suicide, teenage drug use, all these categories all line up. So the role of the father, particularly in young girls, is crucial, as it is with all children. So I love to hear you talking about that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's an important piece that I feel like is changing, hopefully. I don't know whether it's anywhere near where it needs to be, but I do think that even like a podcast like this, I think it's talked about a lot more than when I grew up. I don't know whether you would agree with that. It feels like being a dad and being involved. I don't know, it was like some weird like 50s trope of like the dad comes home and like doesn't care and like reads his paper and get away from me. That is not the dads that I am around or love to hang out with or really even see in the media now. Like there's a lot of involved dadding that's occurring that I think is really good for society.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Yeah, there's no doubt. Like my father was born in 1930, so he grew up from a whole different generation of where the dads were that particular guy who would come home, belt down a glass of scotch and watch you know what I mean? That ain't the way it is today at all. A lot of dads are, just like
No.
you said, a lot more involved there too. So yeah, I agree with you there. So has becoming a father, has that changed you as an artist? Has it changed you as an entertainer at all, would you say?
Yeah, I think more so just going back to like priorities and how like what's important. And I was someone who would just go for as long as ever I could and just try to. I love making music and perform music so much that my wife would come with me and we would figure it out. And when you have kids, it forces you. You can't be anywhere near as spontaneous. You are forced into a box, which to some people is like, oh God, I don't want that box. But the thing about that box is it also forces you to grow, um, like with yourself. They're like they really by staying in the box and having to be responsible to someone and reliable and all this stuff, you grow all these different muscles that I'm so grateful that I've had to learn how to grow. It's not easy and it's hard and frustrating, but it makes me a much more well-rounded person, I would say.
Yeah, very well said, Andy. What would you consider to be the top values that you hope to instill in the girls growing up?
Equality of men and women is really important, and I think we still have a long ways to go. And just being a guy in the world, I've heard about it, obviously, and you can see it. But it's different when you have your daughters and you're watching them be hit with certain things in the world. Even the 4-year-old is just starting to hit certain spots. You're like, oh, there's going to have to be a lot of extra thought and attention, and I'm going to have to support you in these ways because the current of the world isn't necessarily to your advantage. And that's really intense and crazy to be true. It just is true, you know. What I One of the things, there's a quote, a Baha'i quote that we say a lot in our house, which is that men and women are like wings of a bird, and unless they're both equally strong, it can't fly. Which is cool because it's this idea that not only will women be better when we can get them up in our society, but there's a version of flight that men don't know about either if they're both equal, which I think is pretty special.
Yeah, I agree there too. And I always watch with my sons just as well, because I know, as we say, with the equality part of it, men much more likely to end up homeless, men much more likely to end up in prison, men much more likely to commit suicide. So as that all goes along, there's pluses and minuses on both sides of the coin there too. So
Yeah, totally.
and one of the things too is that my discipline is different with my boys than it is with my girl. My wife gets on me. I'm definitely trying to up my discipline game with my daughter, a challenge it may be. So what type of disciplinarian are you? Are you a spanker, timeout guy? And is it different than the discipline style you grew up with?
I didn't get spanked growing up. What I got from my mom for sure was once she said something, that was it. So we're not gonna like play around. If she doles out some sort of punishment, you're grounded for this many days, don't even bother coming to try to like whittle that down. That is what it is. And so that's kind of where I stand, is like I'll give warnings, like, I'm going to say this, and once the words come out of my mouth, they are immovable. And I think it's really funny, like when you pick your battles to use that. Sometimes it's on something kind of important or big, and then sometimes it's like, no, you got to finish your meal here. This is what we said. And so I am very careful as to when I pull that card. But if I pull the card, I'm a brick wall. And I'll tell that to my daughter as well. Like, once the decision's made, I'm a brick wall. It's not changing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that's something that you mentioned before there that has changed about dads from years ago. And a lot of the dads that I get on today, when I ask them the discipline question, they'll say, "Oh, it's much different than when I grew up. I got the belt, or I got the spoon, or I got the
Oh
switch."
yeah.
And so and they all say, "Well, I don't do that." So the discipline style has definitely changed. And I even wonder sometimes, like, my father never seemed to feel guilty about the discipline he would put on me. And I feel kind of like a little bit of like, am I being too hard on them sometimes? So
Yeah.
there's definitely a transfer from years ago.
Did you? So wait, you did get spanked or no?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And do you think there's any value to that or no?
I don't think there was any negative to it. I mean, I definitely didn't have to get spanked much because I learned my lesson, and that was one of the things too. Like, I was a kid who grew up that where my mom would say, "Just wait till your father gets home." That was enough to kind of straighten me up for the rest of the afternoon. Like, I had that
Yeah, got it.
fear in a sense of not wanting. That's going back to that fatherless crisis when kids don't have that. Like, I was a kid, God forbid, I broke a window in a store. I would rather the police get me than my father get a hold of me. So I think if you don't have that type of discipline aspect or that father figure, I think that also creates a lot of the trouble that we're seeing with the youths.
Yeah, I would say that too. I also think it's just so specific to the kid. Like I use the analogy, it's a terrible analogy, but I have a French bulldog, and she's great and she's fantastic and she never acted out. And I thought that I was like a great dog owner because she was great. And then we got another French bulldog, and that thing literally never listened, and then eventually bit us bad enough that we had to get rid of her. And so it's funny because so much of it is you hopefully are parenting a little bit towards the kid. I can see that my two girls are so vastly different that I'm hoping when it comes to yeah, like discipline and structure, that there has to be some room for like, oh, how do I get the best out of you? And it might be a little bit different than how I get the best out of you.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. My four kids couldn't be more different. One, you could tell him not to touch the stove, he'll listen. The other one got to burn himself before he'll never touch the stove again. So,
Exactly.
and one thing I recommend that I did for myself with my older boys, it was the Five Love Languages by Chapman. It's a book that
Yeah.
I know is recommended for a husband and wives, but to do that with your kids and learn their love language is very beneficial in disciplining them as they get older.
Oh, that's really cool. I got to reread that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely recommend to do it with your kids. Now you got another tour coming up here. I'm curious, how do you work it with the tour? Do you bring the kids on tour with you? Do you have a home base that you return to after each stop? Tell me about the tour. What can we expect, and how do you work it out with the family?
Yeah, man. So I have a new tour we just announced called The Art of Joy. We got some incredible new music that we're putting out, and it's going to be a huge party. That's one of my favorite things in the world to do is go put on big, awesome shows for people. The rule that I have with my wife about it is that we try not to go more than 2 weeks without connecting with her, with the family, with everything. So once we set the tour, then we try to figure out, all right, where's the days off? How do we make this work so that it's not more than 2 weeks? Something about past 2 weeks starts to feel like the lack of connection is a little bit scary. So especially with kids. So I like a lot of times I'll just take red eyes home and have like a normal Halloween thing or something, and then get on the flight at the end of the night to make sure. It's just a lot of extra travel that's 100% worth it. I haven't brought him out. My littlest one was born like the second week of the pandemic, so she doesn't even know. We were walking in my house the other day, and she pointed to she's talking a lot for 1.5, and she pointed to a photo of the older girl like on stage that we took in front of a crowd, and she's like, "What happened? Like, what is that?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, you don't know anything about how this goes. You don't know, like, you haven't been around massive groups of people. You haven't, it's pandemic babies." So I'm excited to eventually get her acclimated to this lifestyle.
Yeah, and Andy, talk to me for a second about that experience. I mean, having a baby, while the pandemic is raging on, like, how has that? So she was born what, right while the pandemic was going on, and were you able to be there for the birth? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, we had a home birth. We had her in my living room, which I personally loved, and it was like super spiritual. The first baby we had in the hospital, and it was a kind of a C-section that had to happen, and it was just kind of intense and stressful. And this one was really, really beautiful and sweet. And so I would recommend it. It was awesome. And we had an incredible midwife, and we were close to the hospital. If anything went wrong, we could drive them over. And it was just like a super spiritual, grounded, incredible, incredible thing. It was awesome.
Wow, very cool. And I want to ask you about your new single, Damn It Feels Good to Be Me. One thing I love about you is you always have the positive, upbeat attitude. And one thing I know is that when you're out on the street and you walk by and you always have a positive, upbeat look on your face, sometimes people think you're crazy. People accept miserable or like, they expect everyone to be kind of angry and mad. And they think you're nuts when you have like a smile on your face all the time. But I
Dude,
love that about
especially in
you.
New York.
Oh,
Especially in New York,
100%.
bro. My God, yeah.
100%. You talk to somebody for 1 minute about how positive you are about your life, then you walk away. They're like, "What's wrong with this guy? Like, what's he on?"
This Joker, yeah. New York
So,
starts with "F you," and then we'll get into it. Yeah.
yeah, right on with that. So, tell me about the new single. What was the genesis of the song? Damn, it feels good to be me. And what's been the response so far?
Man, it's been an incredible response. We just put out the music video, and now we're like, put up the tickets on sale for tour. We're heading out in February. It's all been going really, really great. The idea is, man, when you can actually stop caring what other people think, when you can stop being so stressed about how you're perceived, and we all have that in different ways. Um, there's just so much power in that. And as artists, maybe we're heightened in that way, but I don't think so. I think everybody has this where they question their own uniqueness, and there's like a current that always tries to pull you into the middle, and to own who you are and what you love and what you're about. That's what the world really wants from you.
Yeah,
That's like
very
what
well
we
said.
want, especially from our artists. We don't want like we want them to be themselves. And I had during the pandemic, with no shows, no touring or any of that, I had this like mini little crisis of like, man, well, what is my life? What am I? What the hell's going on? I think a lot of people have that, with just not being able to do their jobs the way that they're used to doing them. And I got into therapy, and my therapist said to me, like, it sounds like you're getting too much of your validation from things outside of yourself. So I started writing songs about that idea and self-worth and value and all that. And this is one of the party jams that came out of that.
Very cool. Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. I think a lot more now than we ever did before with social media, Instagram, and it all being about that image and that persona rather than being true to who you are. So I definitely think
Yeah.
much needed today for sure. And what's coming up next for you here, Andy? I know we got the tour going on. What kind of projects or what kind of goals you have for yourself for the future?
Yeah, man, we got a lot of new music coming. I would just love to just came to you from the studio with some more music that I'm super excited to release, and a lot of time and energy going into making sure this tour delivers in the way that I know that it can. I'm just so excited. I feel like I'm all bottled up from not performing, that I want to go big. I'm really excited.
All right. Well, yeah, let it out. All right. Last thing I want to hit you with here, Andy. I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
This little piece of advice is that so much of being a new dad is just being on defense. Like you're just trying to hang on and keep it together. Like, oh, I came in and the dog shit on the floor. My daughter shit on the floor. The dog's eating. Oh my God. Like so much is happening right now that a lot of energy is put into just like defending sanity. And if you can throughout the day, 2 or 3 times, make a little mental switch that goes like, I'm going to go on offense and intentionally do something that's fun with my daughter, or intentionally think of something fun to sing with you, or intentionally make this little meal that we're making. Let me put some like blueberries on it and make some eyes. Like offense as opposed to defense, even a couple times a day can make a really big difference.
Wow. Yeah. Very well said. I love the message. It's been a lot of fun for me. I got to say, Andy Grammer, you're a first class father all the way. And thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on
Dude,
First Class Fatherhood.
love what you're doing, dude. Keep doing it.